Hello, everyone, and welcome to CNS Sportscast. I'm Christian John. He's Sam Daring, and we are back with another episode. We are going to be doing the same format we did last week, and our topics this week are Gerald McCoy and where we think he should go, college basketball coaches making the jump to the NBA, whether or not we believe the Raptors can put an end to the Warriors' reign, which NFL coaches we believe are on the hot seat, and the report that Daryl Morey has made every Rocket available except for James Harden.
All right, so let's get started. Gerald McCoy was cut last week. He's arguably one of the best defensive linemen in the league, and it still confuses me. He must have wanted a whole lot of money that the Buccaneers cut him for Ndamukong Suh, and Ndamukong Suh is getting to be washed up at this point ever since he left Detroit. But there are three front runners for Gerald McCoy, and that's the Browns, the Ravens, and the Panthers. Now, my number one team, I would definitely say, is the Browns. They, even before Gerald McCoy was cut, they were looking at the possibility, exploring the idea of trading for him. Now, remember, they had Danny Shelton, who, yes, he was young and he still had a lot to prove. And then he was traded. He was traded to New England. So the Browns, they're on the rise, but they have a fairly weak front defensive line, and I think Gerald McCoy would definitely boost that quite a bit, and I think they would bolster that defense a lot, seeing as they've added quite a bit of defensive playmakers this offseason.
I really like his fit with the Ravens, and I think the Ravens should play this aggressively. They lost so much on the defensive end this offseason with Mosley, Eric Weddle, Suggs, and Zadarius Smith. So I definitely think that adding McCoy into that defense to get back another playmaker would be huge for them. And like you said, the Browns are interested in him, and the Ravens should be cognizant, and they definitely need to realize that the Browns added a lot this offseason. They can't afford to have the Browns add another guy.
Agreed. But the Browns have addressed just about every position on that defense except for defensive line. And it would only make sense seeing as they have quite a bit of draft picks to give up. I think John Dorsey is one of the smartest GMs in the game. And they have quite a bit of assets. They have plenty of assets. If I rephrase that, they have plenty of assets to give up and even a cap space where Gerald McCoy, I don't see him getting more than a 2-year deal. He's going to want a whole lot of money, and he deserves it. But I think if he goes to either of these teams, I think he's going to be on like a nice one, maybe two-year max deal. But I definitely feel like the Browns could use him a lot.
Well, I just think that the Browns did at least add a front seven guy in Olivier Vernon, and the Ravens signed Pernell McPhee and then another pass rusher, but it's slipping my mind. They need this bad. Their defense was the reason they were a playoff team last year.
Zadarius Smith is a big loss to that team. I will give you that one. That's a huge loss. But the Browns, see, like the thing about the Browns is they use a lot of their draft picks. They start them almost right away just because they don't have a lot of depth at their position. Which is like Danny Shelton was supposed to be explosive. He was supposed to be very good. And they've been watching some of his film. Like, he was unbelievable. And like you can't make assumptions about him now just because, like, I mean, when he was in Cleveland, just because he was only there for, a year or two? I don't remember. He was only there for, like, maybe 2 years. 2 or 3 years before he got traded to New England. And ever since that, like, he was supposed to be their big answer on that front line. And I think Cleveland could bolster that. I think Gerald McCoy Jared McCoy, Olivier Vernon, and yes, I definitely agree. Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon on both sides of the DN. And then you have Jared McCoy. I honestly think that could be an elite defensive line, defensive forefront. And I think if I'm the Browns, if I'm John Dorsey, I'm going all in, and I'm making phone calls right away for Gerald McCoy. So it'll be very interesting to see where he ends up. You make some great points. I think the Ravens do need him. I think the top two teams. I think these two teams need them more than the Panthers. I wouldn't say the Panthers are desperate, but I haven't heard there's been no hearings of or rumors, I guess, of Jared McCoy's visits. But then again, he just got cut last week, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets signed within the next week, which I think is very possible. Seeing as he extended his visit with the Ravens, and I'm pretty sure he still has yet to visit the Browns. And the Browns have been on him for quite some time now, even before he's got cut. So it'll be interesting. Definitely something to come back to. Moving on. So as we all know, Juwan Howard, after the departure of the recent remind me of his name again,
John Beilein.
After he made the jump to the NBA, Juwan Howard is now the new Michigan head coach. And now this kind of goes around in all sports. It's definitely something to discuss for other sports in the future. But Beilein making the jump to the NBA to the Cavs sparked a lot of attention, especially in our eyes. The question comes to mind is, should college basketball coaches be making the jump? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What do you think?
I think it's exciting. That was my first real emotion when I saw that Beilein had agreed to be the Cavs' next head coach. However, college coaches making the jump hasn't really worked out other than Brad Stevens. Although Brad Stevens did not have a great year coaching this season. So I guess that one's still up in the air. I do believe that college coaches will be good for development, and if Beilein does well and this becomes more of a trend, I see that as becoming a trend is the development on these teams, like how the Bucks developed and some guys on the Raptors like Pascal Siakam and such really became good NBA players. I do believe that will happen with these college coaches becoming NBA head coaches. However, I don't know how much winning we'll see.
Yeah, you make some great points. It's interesting because he went to a team that was in the process of rebuilding. Grabbing a guy like Colin Sexton, who is the perfect guy to start your rebuilding, a guy about to be a second-year player out of Alabama. It'll be interesting. I will be very interested to see the next coach that goes to a team with a bunch of veteran players. And this also came to mind is, as long as we're talking about college coaches making the jump, what about former players going back to NBA teams and coaching? Now, we haven't seen that since, Jason Kidd with the Bucks, and the Bucks have quite a similar team this year, and what a difference a coach can make. It's unbelievable. But then you go back to the Lakers, who had Derek Fisher, and that didn't pan out at all. The Lakers have gone through a series of coaches, and the Lakers are just a mess right now. But what are your thoughts on the former players coaching? I from the history that we've seen it, I think it could still happen, but I don't think it's going to pan out. I can see the trend ending soon. But judging from the seasons from Jason Kidd last year, who the Milwaukee Bucks had very similar talent and were easily a playoff team for the talent they had, and then Derek Fisher, who obviously did not pan out with the Lakers. What are your thoughts on former NBA players making the shift to coaching?
I'm actually quite a big fan of it. I'm going to argue with you there that former players have had a good deal of success. Look at Steve Kerr in Golden State. Look at Doc Rivers has won a championship in his career. Rick Carlisle in Dallas has had a pretty good career. There's definitely some good spots in the NBA where former players have done well coaching, and I think it's a good thing for a team with a lot of veterans to have a former NBA player have that voice in the locker room.
Because they'll be able.
McMillan's another one.
They'll be able to relate, and I'll be honest, I don't really consider Steve Kerr yes, it's an example, but you could put any coach on the Warriors, and they can coach themselves. Steve Kerr's done that before.
Yeah, I'm gonna again disagree with you on that. How many championships did Mark Jackson win with the Warriors? With the same roster essentially before Kevin Durant went over there. They won a championship before Kevin Durant, and I think people forget about that.
True. They're also better without Kevin Durant as well. In the playoffs. This year's playoffs. And KD's out game 1. And even with KD back, they're going to be twice as good. But it's very interesting to see. And speaking of the Warriors, can the Raptors stop the Warriors with their reign in the NBA Finals? What do you think?
Yes. I believe that the Raptors could win this series. Do I think they will? No. But could they? I do believe it's possible. On the Warriors right now, who defends Kawhi Leonard? Klay Thompson, probably, which is all fine and good. However, if Fred VanVleet or Norman Powell shoots out of their mind, they're going to have defensive problems until Kevin Durant comes back and can guard Kawhi Leonard, I believe.
Now, the big question is, can Klay Thompson guard Kawhi Leonard? Can he stop Kawhi Leonard?
Nobody can stop Kawhi Leonard completely.
I 100% agree.
I can't stop him.
I, for one, think the Warriors obviously have more talent, but as we have seen the Raptors come back from a 2-0 losing the series 2-0, as we've seen them come back from those 4 straight games, if they come in the playoffs hot as they were, I think they will make the series more interesting. Now, if we were to put Milwaukee in there, it's interesting. I think if they would have played like they did in Game 2, I think they would have taken Golden State to 7 games. But if they would have played like that, I think they would have lost in 5 or 6 games. But mine goes both ways, because your points exactly 100% agree. I think that if they play like that, if they come in with all the momentum, that they had coming from Game 6, from the Eastern Conference against Milwaukee, then I think they could take 6, maybe 7 games. I don't think they're going to win. If I'm being honest, I think they'll be lucky if they get 2 at max. But I think the Warriors take this game in 5. But it all depends on how Siakam plays, if Fred VanVleet keeps it up, if Kawhi Leonard becomes still as unstoppable, which he is. Nobody can stop Kawhi Leonard. But it'll be interesting. And I know KD's injury, it's not horribly major, but he was out for the Western Conference Finals. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't think he'll have too much of a problem, but it'll be interesting to see how well how well KD comes in, how he'll adapt, how the rest of that team will adapt with KD back after being without him for an entire series, probably about a series and a half. So I think the Warriors take this game in 5, but I think if the Raptors come in with a lot of momentum, with the same momentum they had, I think they could make the series more interesting.
If Toronto wins game 1 like they should, because they're the team that's played more recently, the Warriors have had, 2 weeks off? Toronto's at home. They have all the momentum.
Mm-hmm.
They have less rust. If they come in and win game 1 of this series, I think it's going to go 6 or 7 at least. Or not at least, but I think that the Raptors could make it go to 6 or 7 with the chance of winning. I mean, if you go to a game 7, you're in the series. It's one game. Anything could happen in that one game.
Right.
I also do believe that the likelihood of DeMarcus Cousins coming back and Kevin Durant, I fear about bringing in too many guys that haven't played in a long time.
Boogie's out for the playoffs, isn't he? I'm pretty sure
he's questionable for game 1.
Is he questionable? Okay. Because I know KD's out, but you never I said before Boogie. You never know Boogie was gonna be the same. We saw some sparks in him towards the end of the season. So it really depends on all those injured players that how well they adapt to being gone for so long. But yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you there too, because if the Raptors win in game 1, I think they have a chance of taking it to 6 games. But I think they need to come in with the same momentum they have, and they've definitely played longer, or they've definitely played recently. They've had this. They'll have 5 days off, and they've had 5 days off, and the Warriors, like you said, yeah, they've had almost 2 weeks off. So it'll be very interesting, and as much as a Bucks fan, I'm going to be honest. I want the Raptors to win.
I don't.
Because I'm sick of seeing the Warriors win every single year.
I hope they win again.
If the Warriors win, I don't care. I could care less who wins, but if I had to pick it, I'll choose the Raptors.
I think if the Raptors win, Kawhi Leonard is cemented to go back to Toronto, and I do not want that as a Bucks fan.
Right, and that'll be something to talk about down the road too. I think if the Raptors make it a series, then if they win at least 2, maybe 3 of the games, take it to 6 or 7, then I would say, but maybe Kawhi should stay. But right, as a Bucks fan, that would not be good. And it'll be interesting because Kawhi wants to go to a contending team. And Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, as much as I love that pair with Dwayne Casey, that team was not going to win a final. And if you put Kawhi in the Clippers, like he's been one of the front runners for a while, the Clippers, one of the front running teams for a while, that Clippers team could be scary. And that's definitely something to talk about along the road, because this summer is going to be very interesting. It's going to be one of the most exciting NBA off seasons that we've had in a while.
Oh, yeah. That much is for sure.
Absolutely. So going on to our next topic, switching gears to football. We talked about, we had a pretty heated topic last week about Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz. Now we're going to talk about coaches. So NFL coaches on the hot seat. I guess I'll start with this one. I had 2 of them in mind. For Dan Quinn comes to mind for the first one, only because if you have a team with that much talent, you have Mohamed Sanu, which is he's not amazing, but he's still a solid second guy to throw to. You have Julio Jones, who's one of the best receivers in the game. You have Matt Ryan, a former MVP quarterback. And then, yeah, you lost Tevin Coleman, but you still have Devontae Freeman to build off of. If you have an offense like that with that much talent and you can't build off it, and you have Vic Beasley, you have Vic Beasley, you have a strong secondary, and you have a strong linebacker core, and you can't get the job done. They missed the playoffs. Can you remind me what pick they had in the draft? Because they took Caleb McGarry. Well, it was a mid-round pick, right?
15, 14, 15,
Yeah,
something
right.
like
Yep, a mid-round pick. And I know because Sarkisian was terrible. Sarkisian was awful, and that goes to show as that'll be an interesting topic to talk about the future as NFL or college coaches making the jump. I'm pretty sure Sarkisian did go back to Alabama, but anyways, Dan Quinn got not demoted. They fired their D coordinator, and Dan Quinn was their D coordinator. Now, Dan Quinn has had some success at D coordinator. He was the D coordinator with the Legion of Boom, the prime Legion of Boom, when they won the Super Bowl. During the 2013-2014 season with the Seahawks. Now, if Dan Quinn gets fired, which I think he definitely should be on the hot seat, you either you find the new head coach, which I would have just demoted him to D-court, or not necessarily demote him. I would have relieved him of his head coaching duties and just kept him as D coordinator in Atlanta when you had plenty of options at the head coaching position to search for out there this past offseason. Or I think if he gets fired in Atlanta and leaves Atlanta, I think if there's D coordinator positions available, I think he'll have no problem finding a job whatsoever, based on his successful history of defensive play calling. What about you?
Yeah, my number one guy is Mike Tomlin. And if anybody is surprised to hear that, I think they've been living under a rock for the last year.
Yeah, they don't fire coaches in Pittsburgh. Remember that.
Yeah, well, I think that's the root of the problem here.
Yep.
But they missed the playoffs. Antonio Brown forces his way out, and Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown both basically point the finger at Big Ben. And what does Pittsburgh go ahead and do? Sign Big Ben to an extension. So I definitely think that Mike Tomlin has had a lot of talent, and I think he's even had more talent than Dan Quinn has, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And they haven't gone to a Super Bowl, I believe, since they lost to the Packers.
Yeah,
right?
that is right. That's exactly right.
And that was a long time ago. So there definitely has to be some answers. I also do think a fun little wrinkle in the potential Pittsburgh job opening would be if it does open up next off season. It would be kind of cool if Mike McCarthy got that job in the end and got to go back home.
Interesting, yeah.
And that's something I'm kind of cheering for in the back of my head.
Yeah. I would rather have him because they're not necessarily rumors, because what a lot of people are saying is that Mike Zimmer could get fired after next season and Mike McCarthy could take over in Minnesota. As Packer fans, none of us want to see McCarthy stay in the division. So I think I'm with you on there. I think I'd rather have him go to the AFC in Pittsburgh. And I think it'll be interesting because Ben Roethlisberger I believe he's on his last year, and then he signed a 2-year extension. So he's got 3 years left. So if Mike McCarthy could get at least one more ring, or a Super Bowl appearance out of Ben Roethlisberger, because you're about to see, it's looking like he has 3 years left, which includes his last year, because then he goes into his 2-year extension. It's looking like these next 3 years are going to be Ben Roethlisberger's last.
I hope so.
Oh, exactly, definitely. But Ben Roethlisberger put up one of the best numbers of his career, and if he had the right coach behind him and Mike McCarthy, I think that would be very interesting to see. And a lot of people, if you read all those articles on McCarthy, he's not taking any days off. He learned in the span of 4 months since January all the way through like March or April. He learned an entire offensive playbook. He teamed with I think it was like DW Sports or something. I don't remember what the group was, but he teamed up with him and he's been like living at or like working at home in Green Bay. In the span of 4 months, he's learned an entire playbook, like kind of basing it off of like his playbook history that he had in Green Bay, or even with the Niners, like his coaching history. Like to me, that's very impressive, and I think if he would have opened up his job opportunities a lot more, or like more than just a head coach, he would have found an offensive coordinator job no problem. But it'll be very interesting. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm cheering for that too. I don't think any Packer fan is gonna want to see McCarthy stay in the division, especially in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'll throw up in my mouth if he's the next head coach of the Vikings.
I mean, like, with the way it happened, you got to have sympathy. But if he goes, it's interesting because if with the way it happened, I think if he went to Minnesota, you can't really have. I myself, um, I would understand it because with the way it happened, you can't help but to like not care, but you have to have somewhat of like disgust. But if he would have got fired at the end of the season, like everyone thought was going to happen, then yeah, you would. I think everyone would be, even myself, would be a little bit more irritated at that moment, at that time. So, moving on to our last topic. So this was put into effect actually today, and I am all for it actually, because this team is never they're not going to win finals with the team with this team, and we've seen it for the past few years, about 2 years now. Daryl Morey has made every player on the Rockets available except for James Harden. I love this, and can you remind me, what is Chris Paul making? Chris Paul is making the most money out of all those guys.
A lot.
And he's 37.
And I mean like an insane amount.
I think it's like 44 mil, isn't it?
Oh,
it's a lot. I know he's the highest paid guy in that roster, which is it's absurd. And James Harden's going to get a big max deal. Obviously.
It'll be 38 and a half next season.
Okay. That's ridiculous. And when I was reading into it today, a lot of people are saying, could we see Chris Paul in LA, either whether it be the Clippers back home, or would it be to the Lakers? I honestly, if I'm the Lakers, if I'm in like win now, I guess, I would not go after Chris Paul. He's 37.
No, he's 30. He's 33.
33.
His contract takes him to at age 37.
True. Okay. But with all the injury history he's had, is Chris Paul really as reliable as he was years ago when he was in his big prime years? No, definitely not. No. So if I'm the Lakers, I would not. It'll be interesting to see if the Clippers take him back. I don't think they will. I think if he goes back to a team, or if he whichever team he goes to, I think he'll be a guy maybe off the bench. But
he's still a starter.
He's still a starter. He's still a starter. But with all the injuries you have out of him, it's interesting. I think it really depends on the team that he goes. Somebody else, I love reading people's comments on this too, because somebody else said, not Chris Paul. Somebody said PJ Tucker, Clint Capella, or James Harden, make one of those three guys available. Now this is an interesting question, because how much, if the Rockets were to trade James Harden, what do you think they were to get, where they would get out of James Harden?
My goodness. I I don't know. That would be so unprecedented to trade an
Right.
MVP type
Exactly.
player.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin. So I guess hypothetically speaking, the Knicks would be a logical type team, right? They want a
Yeah.
superstar bad.
Yep.
They
Yeah.
have young assets. They have draft capital.
They have 2 max contracts left to sign people.
So let's say the third overall pick, Kevin Knox, Mitchell Robinson,
You're gonna have to trade Dennis Smith too out of that.
Dennis Smith Jr. They have an extra first next year from the Mavericks from the Kristaps
Frank
deal. Frank
Nicolina.
Ntilikina.
Yep.
Yep. I don't think that gets you James Harden.
No, he really does. No, he doesn't.
I don't think it would.
Um,
that is insanely tough. I don't.
I think
don't
if
know
he were to
can,
go to a team, he would have to go to like a playoff team. Whichever playoff team has like the highest draft picks. The one team I can think of is the Celtics because they have 3 picks this year. You'd have to give them all 3 of the picks.
Yeah, but I don't know if those picks are high enough. The lowest or the highest draft pick out of them is 14. You would have to give up Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. I still don't think
you'd have to
not James Harden.
You would have to give up like probably 3 or 4 of that starting 5. Jason Tatum, Kyrie's gone, so he's out of the picture. Gordon Hayward.
Al Horford's a free agent.
Gordon Hayward.
Or Al Horford can be a free agent.
You'd have to give up.
Gordon Hayward's not good.
Agreed. Yeah, he's not the same out of his injury as we've seen. But if you were to hypothetically, trade, let's say this: if you were to trade 2 of the 3 first, like the 2 highest first round picks that the Celtics had this year, with Jason Tatum, with Jaylen Brown, with Gordon Hayward, I don't think that gets you James Harden.
No,
because this year's draft is not deep. It's not. And
I mean, maybe the only thing I could really think of would be what if New Orleans called and offered like Anthony Davis,
right? Because it would have to be like an upcoming
like that.
I
think it would have to be another player. It would have to be a star.
It would have to be like AD,
player.
Drew Holiday. That's tough.
Maybe a team like the Wizards, you give them Bradley Beal, the 8th pick in the draft, I believe they have.
Well, then I feel like you'd have John Wall's gone too.
No, I would. Nobody on this planet wants John Wall on their basketball team with that contract. not after he signed the Supermax. Jesus, I don't think there's a package out there unless you give them
Here's one.
A LeBron or a Giannis.
A LeBron or a Giannis or a Curry.
I still don't know.
What if you give him the Splash Brothers?
Well, Klay Thompson's a free agent.
Very true. What if you give Steph Curry? Yeah, you're right. Klay Thompson's a free agent, so Steph Curry, KD are out of the picture.
I'm gonna go with there's no package for.
I don't see Harden leaving. I think Harden.
No, James Harden was never available.
I don't think he. I know he's never available, but this is like hypothetically speaking.
No, right, and I just don't think there is a package out there for him.
I think the only way he leaves is in free agency, which I think
he'll never do that.
He'll never do that. Yeah. Yeah, but I guess interesting topic. Yeah. So I guess going back to our discussion, what do you like I said, I love that he's making this thing, making everyone available except for James Harden because one, you got to keep James Harden to build off of your MVP player, and with the team that we've had, you've seen him. They've lost to the Warriors for 2 straight years. He wants to build a team that can stop the Warriors, and obviously we've seen the past 2 years It's not it. It's just not. And the question that comes to my mind too is, should Mark D'Antoni be on the hot seat? And after Daryl Morey's comments today, I think if he does it, I think if he makes the right moves in the offseason and changes this entire team up, and if it comes back the same, if not stronger than next year, and they don't make the playoffs, or they come back and lose to the Warriors, or don't even make it to the Warriors, he's in the hot seat. He has to be. What are your thoughts on that? I guess the whole Rockets situation.
I think it's an off season too early to just go, let's completely blow this up. This is now the off season where you can look and you go, the Warriors are finally going to be vulnerable, it looks like. Because what happens if Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson both leave? They're vulnerable now. In that sense, they would be very, very vulnerable. Now, say Klay Thompson goes back, you still have Steph Curry, you still have Draymond. I think this is one season too early.
I still think it's a possibility that Klay Thompson stays. As a basketball fan, I don't want him to stay. I think he should go to I definitely think he should go to a team like the Lakers, because the Lakers, as we've seen, they lack in shooting. They only have LeBron. They need a guy like Klay Thompson. But I still definitely think it's possible, because if KD leaves, Klay's the next guy to get paid. But from what rumors, if you see on all ESPN updates, Twitter, he has not been happy with his situation. But KD's out, KD's leaving. So, yes, they're vulnerable, but if you keep Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond, that team is still a finals contending team. But can they be stopped?
They're definitely way weaker.
Right. It's possible.
They're another year older. It's definitely something. Now, let's say the Rockets could go out and
DeMarcus Cousins is up. Now, if the Warriors win, Steve Kerr literally said this, like, to me right now, this doesn't mean anything, because DeMarcus Cousins could still be unsigned. They could still sign him to a big deal if KD and Klay, like, I think there's plenty of scenarios you could go with that in the offseason too. If KD and Klay Thompson leave, I think Boogie stays. But I think if one of them stays, I think if that would be Klay, obviously, because KD bought a house in New York. Not that would mean a lot of things, but
yeah, a lot of guys have a lot of houses, a lot.
Right. And yeah, not that we can assume things right away, but if Klay Thompson were to stay, of him and KD, I think Boogie leaves. Boogie's making a league minimum, and Steve Kerr literally said at the beginning of the year that they're going to win a finals, and they're expecting him to leave. But I think if KD and Klay both leave, I think it's a big possibility. They're still weaker, but I still think it's a big possibility that Boogie stays.
I just don't think that's still.
They're still weak. They're still weak.
That's a very weak team. I don't think that's a team that you even favor in the West.
I think somebody's going to stop the Warriors next year.
That's why I think this is an offseason too early, because the Rockets 2 years ago should have won that game. They missed 27 straight threes in Game 7 at home. They should have won that game. If Chris Paul plays in that game, they win. They go to the finals. They probably beat LeBron in the finals, and Harden and Paul both have rings.
Right, but remind me which game this was this year. It's like the middle of the series, game 3 or 4. James Harden and Chris Paul. If you like, Stephen A. said this. I agree with him. They should be ashamed of themselves. Their stat line was absurd. It was surreal. It was crazy. In crunch time, James Harden and Chris Paul. Now, I think if you were to make any of those guys available for trade, I 100% think it's Chris Paul, especially with that contract. If you were to choose one player off that Rockets team, if he didn't do it, I guess one player that's gone first, who is it? I think it's Chris Paul. I think it should be Chris Paul.
I just don't know what you get for Chris Paul.
At that age,
if you
with
could
that
tell
contract,
me,
with
if you
the
tell me
injury
you could go
history.
get Bradley Beal, yeah, then you go get Bradley Beal, but I don't think you do. I don't.
Not with that contract, no.
So is it worth it enough to trade him for what you would get? And like I said, I think I would give this one last run. If it doesn't work out, a lot of those guys are still under contract. You could still trade a guy like Capella next off season. You could trade Chris Paul next off season. And then you let D'Antoni go. His contract's up after this season. And if you can't make it to the finals next year, you let it go. But this is not the off season to blow it up in my eyes.
And I love the idea. I don't think they're going to trade all three of the players. I think they'll trade one guy. I think they'll trade one guy. And I think Chris Paul should be the guy traded. But with that injury history, with that contract, nobody's going to want to take that contract at 33 years old with that injury history and it takes him to 37. Now, if I were to pick one guy that could be traded first, if one guy that could be traded this offseason, I think it's PJ Tucker or Clint Capella. Because they're under, like, Clint Capella just signed an extension last offseason. So you still have, it was a 2-year extension, right?
4.
It was 4? Okay, yeah. So you have 3 years out of him left. And can you remind me what PJ Tucker's extension was?
Oh boy, I think PJ Tucker got a 3-year deal, but so that would mean he's got another 2 left.
Yeah, because he was signed.
Oh, it's a 4-year deal. Excuse me.
Because he was signed before Capella. Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah, he's got 2 years left. Capella's got 4.
Okay, so that changes my mind. So I think PJ Tucker could be the first one traded because you have 2 years left to prove him for him to like adapt to the team or get anything out of him. I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to trade all 4 of them. I think he made the right move in saying all that, because that leaves the door open for any phone calls and for the offseason, because I think he just made Houston's offseason a bit more interesting than it could have been. So as we said before, I'm going to love coming back to all this stuff in the summer, shortly after the finals, even during the NBA draft. And I think the NBA draft is going to answer a lot of teams' questions for the offseason, which is why I don't think any of those big names none of those big names are going to sign till after the draft. So especially because the finals will run right into the finals flows right before ends right before the draft. So it'll be interesting, and this next month is going to be very interesting in the NBA world.
All right. Well, that is all we have. We hope you enjoyed, and we will see you all next week.